Welcome back to the channel. We are going to be talking about the topic of, is my portfolio's performance normal this year? That's the topic for today. If you are new to the channel, my name's Chris Hammond. I'm a financial advisor at Hammond Wealth Advisory. We help our clients getting close to retirement. Maybe they're already retired and they want to make sure that they have their financial plan in place, that they're doing the right things with their investments, that they're doing the right things with their distribution strategies and looking at their taxes each year, things like that. And on today's video, we're going to be diving into this idea of what's normal for a portfolio's performance and when should you be worried if things aren't going normal. Now, the first thing I like to start off with to talk about this is, why is this extremely important to you? And there's actually a couple of reasons why that's the case. First, knowing what is normal for your portfolio helps you to be aware. Be aware of normal and know if you're comfortable with that. That's the first thing right there. It's always good. You always want to know what the norm is and when should I be worried, right? Maybe you shouldn't be worried when whatever happened with your portfolio, say in 2022, just last year, maybe that was completely normal, maybe it's not. But it's good to know that and be aware of what normal is. Another reason is that it helps you stick with the strategy. Okay, that's going to be very important. If you're constantly changing your investment strategy, that can be very bad for your investment goals long term, which would also translate potentially into being very bad for the retirement lifestyle that you're going to get to live. If you make certain mistakes with swapping out strategies all the time without there being some, other reason for doing that other than, the market was down 10% this year, for example, right? You want some other reasons for swapping out strategies. That would be number two, why this is important to you. And number three is that it helps you to not fail. All right. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, if it's normal for your portfolio to have certain amounts of returns on any given year, it allows you to stick to that plan longer. And the longer you can stick with the plan without being scared and panicking at certain moments, or being greedy and buying in at the top right before the next crash happens, the better prepared you can be and the better you can stick with a plan, the more likely that you're going to be a successful investor long term. Okay, so that's really why this is important to you. And I would say that there's a lot at stake when it comes to your retirement. Now, how do you figure this out? Like, what is normal for your portfolio in any given year? Well, there's three things that you can look at, and we're going to break this down right here. So the first one would be, what's the average return on your portfolio? In other words, if you took all the holdings that you have in your portfolio right now, on average, if you look back 10, 20 or so years, what's the average return for that? So let's just say you had a portfolio that you're holding right now, and you looked back and historically, these holdings had an average return of 8%. All right, well, that's good to know. That's the first step of the puzzle. The next step of the puzzle is to figure out what your standard deviation is. Now, that's just a complicated statistical word. It's really not that complicated. It just sounds intimidating. All a standard deviation is if your average return is 8% a year, and you know that if you have it invested in the market, you don't ever really get just 8% in any year. Really, you're going to get maybe 12% some years. You might get -5 one year. You might get 15% the next, 6 the next, -10 the next. But you never really get your average. You never get it. It's because those returns, they deviate from the average, and they can measure what the standard of that deviation is. So for instance, if you had a portfolio that had a standard deviation of 10%, and this is something that can be mathematically calculated with your portfolio. If you don't know how to do this, it might help you out to reach out to a financial advisor that could help you address this and figure out what your numbers are. But if you had a portfolio that had an average return of 8%, but it had a standard deviation of 10, its range of returns could be up above 8% and below 8% as well, based on that standard deviation. Now, the third piece of the puzzle to figure out if your performance was normal this year, you need to use a few simple stats to do this. And I like to think of it like this. I like to think of it like a bell curve. So let's say you have this bell curve right here of all the possible returns that could happen during the year. And let's say right in the middle of that bell curve is your average. And we're just going to use 8% as that average. Now, you have this bell curve of where things could be. Now, your standard deviation, one standard deviation might be right here, and that would be above 8%. That'd be 18%. And you might have another standard deviation right above that. So this would be two standard deviations off, and you're at 28%. Pretty simple stuff. But it works in the reverse as well. So going down this way be negative 2%. Going down this way might be negative 12%. We're just taking 10. That's all we're doing. Real simple. Now, statistics, they tell us that this is within two standard deviations, all this right here. And it says that 95% of the time, the returns for your portfolio will fall somewhere within this part of the bell curve. That means if your portfolio went down, if it had an average return of 8% and a standard deviation of 10%, and it went down by 12% last year, that is falling within the statistical bounds of what normal would be. 95% of the time, it'll fall within that range. If your portfolio returned 20%, that's within the two standard deviations. That would also be within normal range. Now, if you know this information for your portfolio, then you can understand that when market does go down or even when it goes up, you can understand, hey, this is normal where things are going to land on my portfolio. It can also give you a bit of predictability where you can kind of understand, like, this is what I can expect going forward. These figures are used whenever a good financial plan is put together that's going to project out your ability to not run out of money by taking withdrawals from a portfolio, because we know that it's not always going to be 8% every year. And so now there's financial planning software that'll run 10,000 different scenarios that'll show if a portfolio at 8% with a standard deviation of 10%, you ran that 10,000 times, it has a high likelihood that you're never going to run out of money by taking these types of withdrawals from that. Very important. But as far as it goes for knowing and being able to stick with your financial plan, understanding what's normal can help you do that. And if you look at your bell curve and you find out that your standard deviations took you down to, like, it's normal to have a negative 30% year because you had some really big standard deviations in your portfolio, you might look at that and say, I'm not comfortable with that. And you might say, it's time to make a change. And it's time to get to something that you're more comfortable, that you can stick with for the long term. That would be one of those times where it actually makes sense to change up your strategy. When you figure out, at this point in my life, I'm not comfortable with this. So again, just to kind of recap, why is this so important to you? Well, first one again, number one, it helps you to know what normal is. And when you know what normal is, you can then determine, am I comfortable with having a portfolio that's what normal is? If you are, you may not need to change your strategy. If you're not comfortable with that, then maybe you do need to change your strategy. And it helps you stick to the strategy. That's very important for your long-term success as an investor, especially in retirement. And there's a lot on the line. When you retire, the money that you have, that you've saved up, you can't replenish that. I mean, that's going to be it. How you manage that, that's what's going to last you the rest of your life, unless you just go back into the workforce again, right? So there's a lot on the line with this. And by helping you know what normal is, helping you stick to the strategy, your investment strategy, that helps you to be successful. That's why that's so important. to understand what your portfolio's normal is, and to be able to stick to that strategy. All right, that's all I've got for today. Super important stuff. If you're looking for additional help with your retirement, hop on over to retirementplanningmadeeasy.com, and you can download a copy for free of the Essential Step-by-Step Retirement Guide, which is going to go over some basics of retirement planning. It's going to help you get started off into the right direction. That is all I've got for this video. I will see you guys on the next one. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.